Hey everyone, it's 4:57 in the morning. I'm Kyle.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Mike.
And tonight on the Sleep Nerds podcast, we replace Mike with a healthier vegan option.
Go for it.
Welcome back, everyone. Holy crap, it's been a really long time since we recorded.
Yeah. I mean, it hasn't for listeners.
Yeah, I was gonna
but-
say, not a long time for you, long time for us.
Yeah, you guys feel like you're traveling through time right now. It has been
That was last
Reference.
episode.
last episode.
Yeah.
You have folded and found a pocket universe where you can just listen to episodes whenever you want to. I feel like we haven't recorded in literal months.
We haven't recorded in literal
I
months.
know.
Because somebody got married.
Who?
I was going to say, the big news, Mike, you got a Nintendo Switch.
I did, right? Highlight of my life for the past 2 months.
Yeah.
Vanessa's going to make us all sound like Judge Doom.
I hope
Or
Vanessa
chipmunks.
just edits in Jason sound effects over all this. I feel eyes in the back of my neck. No, congratulations, Mike. You did get married.
I did?
Yeah.
What?
I kind of remember it, but you had an open bar.
Yeah.
I think I drank 5 margaritas,
Yeah.
the wine, all the champagne at the table.
I remember you definitely did drink all the champagne at the
Yeah.
table.
I think I was sitting at the table when you did that.
Yeah, I definitely took advantage of your open bar.
Well, I think most of the people at our table didn't drink their champagn either. So
'cause I
you
drank
were
all of it.
you were just going around drinking everyone's untouched
We're
champagne.
not going to talk about the champagne thing. That was a mix-up.
But it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Got
fun.
Drunk.
It was all right.
I really enjoyed dancing to Footloose,
Yeah, that was fun.
especially after all the
There
drinking.
there was a point where
I was going to say, I don't think I didn't know you were that limber, Kyle, because I saw you out there a
Yeah, you
good
should
amount
see
of time.
me.
look, I went out. I went out. This is the sign of a good wedding or good party, I think. I went out. I think originally because someone was like, "Hey, let's go dance," and I was like, "Yeah, sure." And then a song came on, and I was like, "Oh, well, I can't go sit down because this song is on." But I'll
Was
go
it eye
down.
to eye?
I don't remember. I was like, I'll go and sit down after this one. And then the next song I think was Footloose. That's what reminded me. And I was like, okay, well, I can't sit down until I dance to Footloose. And then the next song that came on was another well, I can't sit down.
Yeah.
So I just danced until I literally passed out on the floor.
No, I was gonna say I don't think I've seen so many excited millennials as when
I
Eye
was
to
gonna
Eye
say-
started
I
playing.
was just
it.
about to say, when Eye to Eye came on, I saw your entire table get up and run to the
That
dance
was-
floor.
yeah.
Literally run to
Yeah,
the dance
yeah.
floor.
I was hoping someone would have remembered the dance. I didn't see anyone do the dance.
I think Jen was kind of doing. She was doing parts of it.
I only remember the fishing pole part.
No one did the perfect cast. That is true.
Yeah.
For excited millennials, you did not have, but the wedding I was at last weekend did have Mr. Brightside playing. That was a lot of excited white millennials on the dance floor, including myself.
Of course.
Anyway,
Not really. I wouldn't. Is that a wedding dance song, Mr. Brightside?
I mean,
It
was played at a wedding and I danced to it, so yeah.
I guess.
Is this turning into the wedding episode?
Yeah, I mean, I was
Top
like, we should
10 weddings.
we should steer away from this because our topic has nothing to do with weddings at all.
It's actually
Villains.
Yeah. had a
So,
think for a second.
is it about weddings? No.
Oh, you design.
Yeah.
No, we are going to talk about villains today. Our favorite villains in media. We'll have to maybe open up with what we think makes the best villain. To me, I think the best villain is kind of like a coin flip thing. It's either someone who doesn't think they're a villain or knows they're doing a bad thing but they think it's for a good reason. Or on the other flip side of that, I enjoy villains that are just complete chaos. They're not doing anything for a specific reason. Almost like a force of nature villain, monster movie stuff. Or I'd even say the Joker in Dark Knight's
So
a
I was
force
gonna
of
say,
nature
so for
villain.
the first one, Doctor Doom. For the second one, the Joker.
Essentially.
Yeah.
I mean,
But-
I'm more a fan of the former part myself. I prefer somebody that doesn't necessarily think they're the villain. They have a good cause. I like the Joker as a character, but I don't like the villains for just evil. Evil for evil's sake. It's not always. It's not my thing.
Yeah,
Personally.
I agree. I think it is sometimes nice to see, but in general I do. And this is I had my reason of what I think makes a good villain tied into the one that I chose. But I'll say it now anyway.
You just go ahead and start with yours then.
Well, I think that is something what you said that my playwriting teacher in high school had this little like manual that was just like a bunch of things for writing that like it was he called it like his playwright Bible or something.
Okay.
And one of them was like bad people don't know they're bad and good people aren't all good. And
Okay.
like so the
Yeah.
bad people don't think they're bad is like a big one to me that is like that sort of I feel like we've complained about this before, but villains who just go out and are like, I want to blow up the world.
That reminds me of that one panel of like whatever X-Men comic with Sauron. They're like, you're like a genius scientist. You could, cure people of cancer. He's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs.
Right, exactly. That is, which I mean, that's funny, but
That
it also
could
is
be
like,
enjoyable too. though.
how far can you take that, really?
Yeah.
Or like, I want to blow up the world. Like, you live on the world. Like,
I'll live on a new world.
I hate
Yeah,
that.
like,
That's my
okay.
least favorite kind of villain is the villain that wants to destroy the world.
right.
And it's because it's part of like a domination. It's like, yeah, but you're there.
Right, like I just want to have like power. And it's like, well, like what? You're gonna like destroy everything. It's
It's
like,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
but I'll be powerful.
Yeah, but you're in charge of a shithole now. Like I don't
Right.
understand that logic, but
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's much more compelling when you have a villain that has like, well, an actual plan that isn't stupid for one, and also like believes in what they're doing. Which I mentioned Doctor Doom, that like panel that gets spread around the internet a lot of him being judged by the Egyptian gods, who are like, okay, well, you're going to be killed if you like stand. I forget the name of the god, but you stand in front of him and like don't like there's any like corruption in your heart or there's evil or something, and he's just like, no, I genuinely have thought out how like the world is going to end, and the only way that it's saved is if I take over and enact these steps.
Is that from Secret Wars?
I don't know.
The-
It's from. I've
the
only seen
newer-
like the pages like out of context on the internet.
I'm not sure
but-
it's from Secret Wars. Most
It
Marvel,
sounds like the newer Secret Wars.
most Marvel
Yeah.
things from the past 10 years, I actively try to block out of my mind
Same.
because they're so terrible.
Before we start, Vanessa would be mad if I didn't mention that one of her favorite villains is Hexus from Ferngully, I think.
I don't remember.
Is it-
Big Spog monster?
Yeah, voiced by Tim
okay.
Curry.
Okay. I
Okay.
don't know if the name's Texas. I don't remember.
Yeah, I
But
was gonna say, I was like, I
He-
don't remember the
It's
name.
definitely Hexus. I just don't remember what it's from. I'm
she
pretty
was
sure
definitely
it's
just talking about Ferngully too. I bought
Yeah.
a bunch of like 80s, 90s like Don Bluth films.
Yeah.
And she's like, do you have Ferngully? And
Yeah.
I
So then-
felt she'd be mad when I said no, so I just didn't say anything. Sorry, Vanessa.
Well,
I googled
You're happy
Hexus
now?
and it
I
just came
mentioned
up
it.
with definitive technology news. I'm sorry, I'm using Google, not Bing. That's why I didn't get the
wow.
results.
We're going to lose that lucrative Bing sponsorship.
We're the only one they're paying.
All right. Aaron, if you want to, you can go ahead
getting
and start with
paid?
yours since it tied into what you're saying.
So, someone who I think exemplifies what I was just talking about, and one of my favorite villains, if you can even call him that, but he is Javert from Les Miserables.
Okay.
Which I enjoyed Les Miserables a lot. I've seen it 3 times, and the like in production on
I've
stage.
seen it 0 times.
Wow.
Production or film.
Yeah. I have more fun stories about that, but I'm trying to stay on track. I always felt he was a really compelling character. He's the policeman who is watching over Jean Valjean. Watching over, that sounds creepy, but actually
lot.
is accurate. When at the beginning of the show, Jean Valjean is in a chain gang and he's about to get off, and Javert is the one who's telling him that he's free and is you're a villain and you're a piece of scum basically because you stole from someone. And Jean Valjean's yeah, I stole bread to feed my sister and her child who were starving to death. But he's just basically the law is everything. And then, so Jean Valjean's here's a brief rundown of a incredibly long book and play, Mike. So he goes on the run and tries to redeem himself. Jean Valjean does. And
Is that Hugh Jackman from the newer one?
yes, Hugh
Okay.
Jackman.
So
And
you got to use actor names because I've only seen the trailer
okay, so
once or twice.
Russell Crowe is
Okay.
Javert and Hugh Jackman is Jean Valjean. So Jean Valjean tries to start his new life, but he's a convict, so no one will give him a job basically. And so he decides to reinvent himself and becomes the mayor of a town, and then and just does good for all these people and is a very charitable person. Adopts a daughter of a woman who dies from disease. And
Anne Hathaway?
yes,
Okay.
Anne Hathaway. And Amanda Seyfried is the girl he adopts.
Oh.
Once she grows
At
up.
what point does this become The Greatest Showman?
I haven't seen The Greatest Showman yet.
Me
I want to
neither.
see it. Okay, so basically
very
Javert
similar.
is like, yeah, you were a criminal, and then B, you like lied and tore up your papers that you had to show everyone to say you were a criminal, and like became mayor instead. And he goes through all this and is constantly just hunting him down through the entire play. And like, I think just what resonates with me is that he has a very black and white view of the world. It's just you committed a crime, therefore you're bad, and he can't see beyond that. And he like is just very steadfast in that. And then when he eventually is like, oh, maybe Jean Valjean is doing something good, he has the chance to, actually Jean Valjean has the chance to kill him and instead sets him free because he's like, I don't want to kill you, like, and then later Javert confronts him like trying to escape, and he's like, yeah, I'm dragging this dying guy with me, can I just get him to a doctor and then I'll come back and you can arrest me? And Javert lets him go, and then that like shakes his worldview so much that he kills himself. So it's just like
Russell Crowe kills himself.
Russell Crowe kills himself. Okay. Yeah, he jumps off a bridge, and so it's just that
it's a little extreme, but
yeah,
whatever.
It was very extreme in the movie. They like had these sound effects. He like jumps off the bridge, and when he like hits the like rocks and water at the bottom, there's like this horrible crunch. It was really like that was
that particular scene in
unnecessary.
the movie cracks me up because Russell Crowe. I have a question.
Just
about
like
the
in
question.
general, that doesn't make any sense. Like this. Sorry,
Well, it's
go
just
on.
like he okay, go ahead. I've been
Like every time Russell Crowe has anything to do in that movie, the camera like whips way out, and it does like like zips around, and then it comes back to him. But it's every time he does anything, I feel he like walks in the scene and the camera's like whoosh, and it does this big circle.
Like the
But when he
Matrix.
I have
kills
some problems
himself,
with the direction of that movie.
yeah, when he kills himself, the camera pans out like out of the fucking atmosphere.
It does. It just goes like way up into the sky.
Like this is
for fucking
unnecessary.
ever. Yeah.
But question, like, is it like was there a particular performance? Because I know there's like just a straight up non-musical movie of that. I know there's like all the different musicals. Is it just like the character type that you like what he does, or was there like a certain performance where you're like, oh wow, I really like this?
Well, I think the non-musical movie is okay, but not my favorite version of the story.
And is that Jeffrey Rush? I think in that.
I think
it's Liam
so.
Neeson.
It's been a while.
I think it's Liam Neeson and Jeffrey Rush. Maybe.
Is it Liam Neeson? I don't remember that at all.
It might be.
It's been a long time since I've seen it. That's the one Shannon McCormick is in, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's just like a random like extra French policeman at some point.
Also in Breaking Bad.
Is he really?
Yep.
I lost my train of thought. Oh, so that's okay. It does some interesting things with the story, but I would say just when I've seen the stage play, like that take on him I think is the best. Like I like Russell Crowe. His voice was not strong enough for that part, and I think like his acting was okay in it, but it was just kind of whatever.
Would you like him more or less if I told you that Russell Crowe was in an Australian rock band called 30 Odd Foot of Grunt?
Like 400% more.
Okay, cool.
That's one of the things I heard about that movie is the singing was off a lot for like all of the characters because the actors tried to sing themselves. And
They filmed it strange. It was like all the singing.
Well, yeah, it was the first one it was the first like musical movie they filmed, and I think only that they filmed it and like recorded the singing as they filmed it rather than like recording the singing in a studio and then sort of like subbing it in, which I thought was interesting and was good for someone like Hugh Jackman who can sing. But for some others, it was maybe like they also did this weird thing. I said I have problems with the direction of that movie. They did every song they filmed in like one take, like it never cut. And I wonder if it's because they were filming it like that. But there were sometimes it just made it really awkward. It was like cut to a different perspective, like do something with the camera. It just made it like I don't know. It just
I think
it didn't,
like there's so many directors now that are fascinated with the no cuts. Like.
They're all kind of like riding Alfonso Cuarón,
It works with like action sequences, but like something like that,
something where there's really a reason for it. But and Sacha Baron Cohen and
Helena Bonham Carter.
Yeah, Helena Bonham Carter, who I don't like.
Oh, they were both in there.
They were both in it, and they were
like
both.
You hate her, and I fucking hate Sacha Baron Cohen.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of him.
I hate them both.
Yeah, and they're like they were both these really great like the comic relief characters. Who are just like very funny characters, and they were not funny in that movie.
Which is weird because, like, Sacha Baron Cohen is.
Yeah, he did this like awful, like over the top French accent too, and it was just like it wasn't good.
I only like him as Ali G. That's all
Ali
I like
G?
him as. Yeah,
I never saw that.
That's fucking it.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Borat. I'm not a fan of like fucking Bruno.
I don't think I saw Bruno.
I didn't see Bruno.
Which was where's the one where he was? I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
I saw most of Borat after it came out. I saw it like on TV after it came out, and I remember thinking like, this isn't as bad as I expected it to be. That was my reaction. I was like, oh, I got a few laughs out of this, because I was like, it was like, I feel like a couple years after Napoleon Dynamite, which I feel like all the same people I knew loved Napoleon Dynamite and thought it was hilarious, and I hated. And so then when Borat came out and all the same people were like, oh, this is the funniest movie ever, I was like, oh, it's going to be super dumb. And then I watched it and was like, oh, it was all right.
It was like that weird like time of quirk. That's like when Napoleon Dynamite and Borat and like Hot Rod and like all those
it was like people discovering like cringe humor. Yeah.
I saw it 2 years after it came out, and I'd heard every single. It was like watching a movie.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this movie is really bad at telling all the jokes my friends have been telling me for years.
Yeah.
And then I remember, because I worked at a video store when it came out, the DVD was. The paper was like, it was printed to look a very low grade quality of the paper, but then the DVD looked like a bootleg DVD.
Yeah.
And just every goddamn person that bought that movie would call us just like, you sold me a goddamn bootleg. I want my money back. Like, it's the joke. That's the joke.
Yeah. We've gone from a
Les
like,
Mis to
very
Borat.
dark topic to like a weird like zany humor topic. So
It's almost like that happens in every episode.
So look, I like that Javert killed himself. Yeah. So anyway, he's a very interesting character to me. I like the idea of a villain who is, I mean, he's playing his role in society and in the world. He thinks he's doing good, and then sort of realizes that the system has let him down. Not in the way that like Jean Valjean is like, oh well, being arrested made it impossible for me to like do any good in the world. Whereas like, oh, I was doing everything I'm like quote unquote supposed to do, and like it wasn't the right thing somehow, and now I have to face the fact that like my entire life's work was like trying to hunt down this guy who is actually a good person, and like I can't cope
Like
with
a
that.
gray area exists.
Right, exactly. A gray area exists. I can't handle it. Need to throw myself into the Seine.
It's so dumb.
You're so dumb.
I learned there's a third perspective. I can handle it.
Basically,
It's time to go.
like, it's very bleak, but I mean the show is called Les Miserables, so
Yeah.
so that's mine.
It's
That's
very
that's my best
French.
villain. Yeah. I
Hugh
think that's
Jackman,
everything.
surprisingly not. Yeah, exactly.
Also Russell Crowe, surprisingly.
Yeah, man,
Or Anne Hathaway.
Mike, did you want to go next or?
Yeah, I could go next. So I didn't take notes like usual, but it's all up here. I
He's
pointed-
just going to say Batman. Batman is somehow the best villain.
didn't we determine that Batman's always the answer already?
Yes, we did. I'm sorry. I knocked
damn
over
it,
my
Aaron.
mic stand and now it won't sit right. Okay, sorry.
So no, not Batman, but Batman related. I picked like I mentioned, I prefer the villain that's not evil for evil's sake. Like I like the Joker, but like I like the villains. Like I think I mentioned before that I really like Mr. Freeze because he's not evil just to be evil. He's got a purpose. But for this, like my favorite villain is or would have to probably be Ra's al Ghul, just because he's always he's not evil for evil's sake. He's not trying to take over the world. I mean, sometimes he's trying to destroy parts of it, but it's all to protect the earth actually. Like his big thing is like, humans are running rampant, everything is overpopulated, this and that, so like we need to like thin it out. He's always like corrupt, like taking down like corrupt governments and stuff like that. So I don't know, I just find that not horrible, I guess. I mean, he's kind of like
You're pro genocide. I get it.
yeah, exactly. No, it's just like I said, he doesn't want to rule the world. He just kind of wants to make it better,
Like steer it in a
better
Right.
direction. Yeah, like cut down on
It's
pollution.
sort
and
of
stuff.
similar to like the Hand, or like I'm trying to think of what the group was in Arrow.
That's the
That's
same thing.
same.
Is it?
Yeah, that's him.
Oh, is it part of it?
Leagues,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
League of Shadow or League of
I
Shadow.
didn't watch
It's
a
got
lot of
several
Arrow
different
past season
names
one.
Yeah.
depending on who you
Yeah,
ask.
but it's like
Depending on who's directing at the time.
He was not great in Arrow, by the way.
No, not
No.
at all.
sort of the like same thing I was getting behind, of like you can see like the rationale
Yeah.
that they're going for, of like, oh, that makes sense, like how they're rationalizing like I need to kill a bunch of humans, like,
Yeah.
but it's for the greater good, even though like their reasoning
The
is
greater
flawed,
good.
you know.
Yeah.
The greater good.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. No, it's just like I'm currently reading the Injustice 2 comic, so like Raish is a big part of that. Like he had like a whole like hidden sanctuary underground where he was like he had animals that had been or thought to have been extinct. Like he had two of every one like there just trying. It's like, yeah, man killed them. I'm trying to save them. It's like, okay, so maybe he's not such a dick. Maybe.
I like the idea of like the philanthropist bad guy.
Yeah.
I feel there's a lot of like Bond villains that way, or like the classy philanthropist bad guy, or like the bad guy with a code or a moral. I enjoy that, and I like that.
I feel like we could do an entire second episode of like villains who are actually kind of right.
Hank Scorpio, yeah.
Yeah.
No, but I like that. I like him
No
too.
one ever picks Italy.
Because he's so well defined by his good guy too. Like he's so well defined by Batman, and I like that relationship that those two have. Like he's never like he wants to like kill Batman all the time. I feel, but he's also not opposed to like calling him and being like, "Hey, we should work together on something."
I mean, he and Batman fight a lot, but I would also say that he never really tries to kill Batman. I think that if he really wanted to kill Batman, he could. It's just that he sees he hopes in like to convert Batman to his ideology, and he always says like, I want you to take my place, like I'm getting too old for this shit. He pulls the classic Danny Glover,
right?
I'm getting too old for this shit. I need somebody else to take over. And he doesn't want it to be anybody in his family, apparently, when he's got tons of offspring.
I do like that he calls Batman the detective.
Yeah, just
that's one of my favorite things he does.
No.
I like that acknowledgement of my favorite aspect of Batman.
Yeah. He never really calls him Bruce or Mr. Wayne or Batman, just detective. At least in the animated series. But
yeah. Is this going to be a Liam Neeson episode?
What?
Liam Neeson's?
I liked Liam Neeson as Raish. Did it bother you as much as it really bothered me that they kept calling him Raz in that movie?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
they can never seem to get it right.
Yeah.
That
seems like such
it's
an easy thing to get
Raz
right.
Or Ray.
I don't know if you've noticed, I have refused to say his name so far.
Have you?
Because no, I don't know what the fuck to call him. Because every like iteration of that character, from the animated series to Arrow to Batman Begins to
what do
anything.
They call him in Arrow?
Raz.
Raz?
No, in
Arrow
it was Raz.
Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
I think different characters call him different shit.
I'm
pretty sure I've
the
picked up the
only
characters.
consistency is in the animated series and Batman Beyond. Because so it's funny that you mentioned Batman Beyond because
I didn't. I said Batman Begins.
No, you said Batman Beyond.
I said Begins.
It doesn't matter. Let's talk about Batman Beyond. I like Batman Beyond.
Anyway.
I like Batman Beyond too. So let's talk about that.
Anyway, well, like when they did that little mini arc where they had Ra's al Ghul come back, Terry McGinnis is like, old bad guy Ra's al Ghul, and Bruce Wayne goes out of his way to correct him. It's Raish. People always say it wrong, but it's Raish. It's like, okay. But I also go with that because, the animated series was the first time I ever heard it spoken.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't in anything prior to that. Like, he
It
existed
wasn't in any movies before that.
Yeah, it wasn't in any movies or TV show. Like, that was the first time they actually used him in media and said his name, so that's what I stick with.
That seems to me like in the Avatar, the Last Airbender movie, where they like call him Ong, and it's like your source material is a TV show. They've said his name. Like
another good villain, M. Night Shyamalan.
He's reforming. He's trying, guys.
He's doing his best.
He's doing his best. God damn it.
But yeah, it is the sort of like when you're making a movie and you have like other movies and like TV shows and stuff to base your material on. Like, why are you mispronouncing names?
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
I feel like with Arrow for Raish, they had a writer probably watched the animated series and then a different writer probably watched the Chris Nolan Batman movies, and they're like, okay, well, they just kept going.
The less said about that season, the better.
Yeah.
That was not good at all.
Side note, speaking of Avatar, I saw that they're releasing the whole series on Blu-ray later this year.
Yeah.
Best Buy exclusive, God damn it.
We're gonna get Kyle to finally watch it.
I want to watch it. I really want to watch it, but I only wanted to watch it if it came on Blu-ray.
I need to get Vanessa to
snob.
watch it too. It's so good.
She hasn't seen it?
No.
Such a good series.
That's what we should do. We should just all marathon it.
That's how I
Vanessa
watched
and I will
it.
marathon it and just give like live commentary.
Okay. We're gonna be like waiting in the other room, like that How I Met Your Mother episode where what's her face Stella hasn't watched Star Wars, and he's like waiting in the other room with like a glass against the door. It's just gonna be like me and my like, are they at this part yet?
Are they laughing?
And you're
Are they
both just
crying?
like asleep in a chair.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
10 minutes ago I started to say, so like where Raish usually uses me as like his plans don't seem that well defined. Like, he has his one motive of like, oh, I want to save the world, but he never really stops to examine that. And it seems like to me it boils down to like, oh, well, he's just a narcissist. Like, he thinks he knows best.
Oh yeah.
And doesn't think of anything beyond that. So like,
I feel like that's most villains with like that kind of like world plan.
I feel like he gets kind of flat sometimes. I guess where they don't explore that motivation a lot, like, and where it's just like, oh, well, I'm gonna like control the world and like do what I see fit to save it. And it's like, oh, okay, well, why do you know best? Oh, because I do.
Well, I think in his case, he's just been around for so long. He's seen so much shit. Like, okay, well, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. Let's try this.
Yeah, he's pretty much like immortal. I think it's like one of those cases where he's been around. He's like, yeah, I've seen like literally every modern civilization and ancient rise and fall. And he's gonna have his like he has his like cliff notes. Yeah. He's like, all right, listen, guys, I got this.
Don't do blood sacrifices.
Yeah. When these things happen, we need to just like bomb the city and stuff.
Wait. On page 55, I have do blood sacrifices. Weird.
Ah, shit. I took the wrong notes 200 years ago. So,
well, sprinting off from
yours.
Yeah, sure. Kind of like a collaboration from a classy villain and someone with lots of source material. I go Hannibal Lecter. Oh. But I'm going to the TV Mads Mikkelsen version of Hannibal Lecter.
Okay.
Who has
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah. Okay. I was just about to say it. I liked Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter a lot because it was just him and Brian Cox as Hannibal Lecter at first. And Brian Cox is in like 4 minutes of Manhunter, and you don't really get like a good view of him as Hannibal Lecter. He's just kind of there. And then even in Silence of the Lambs, it's a very iconic role, and I liked it a lot until
at the time,
I started watching Hannibal. And I think my view, it's Anthony Hopkins is so cartoonish as Hannibal, and it's Mads Mikkelsen's almost doing the opposite. And my favorite example is like Anthony Hopkins in Silence of the Lambs would be like, "Oh, I'd love to have you for dinner," and it's like that.
Dun, dun, dun.
And it was very purposeful. And in Hannibal, Mads Mikkelsen, you know, his delivery was just like, "Oh, I'd love to have you over for dinner," and then like you could see him like catch the joke in his head.
Yeah, and
kind
then
of
he
smirk.
laughs to
and he's
himself.
like, I made a joke.
Yeah.
And I love that idea of, like I said, a villain that doesn't think he's a villain. And I don't think Hannibal, I think he realizes what he's doing by societal norms isn't right.
Yeah.
But he almost feels like, one, I think he's super arrogant, so he feels he has the right to.
Yeah.
That's kind of this like God creator / destroyer thing. And two, he's, he says it in the movies and he says it in the show. He only eats rude people. So he thinks he's kind of doing like society a favor. And I think that he uses that position as like a psychiatrist to be like, oh, wow, you're really fucked up and kind of beyond saving. It's like, I'll eat you.
Yeah.
Or like people he meets that are rude in the show, like he eats them. And I enjoy that. Or it eventually devolves into people that like will discover his secret, he starts killing them too. But
they can be side dishes.
But I like that
Rude
idea.
people
Was Silence of the Lambs the first Hannibal Lecter film, or was there something before that?
I've
only seen Silence of the Lambs.
Manhunter was a Michael Mann film in the 80s that was with like the Tooth Fairy. And Hannibal Lecter was in that in a very limited capacity. Brian Cox played him, and it was like 4 or 5 minutes of screen time, I feel. And then in Silence of the Lambs, it's a continuation of that, and they cast Anthony Hopkins. In the books, are the same way. The books go Red Dragon, and then they remade that with Anthony Hopkins and Edward Norton.
Which was the one they made with the young guy?
I thought that was
Hannibal Rising.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a monstrosity.
That like no one ever saw. Yeah, you don't like
that. Yeah, it's fucking terrible. That story only exists because the writer of the series, Thomas Harris, said, "Hey, we want to do another Hannibal movie, and we're gonna do it with or without you." So he was essentially forced to rush a book, so they could make it into a movie. Yeah. And that always does it.
Never works out well. Yeah.
But no, to go back about like other reasons I like Hannibal. One, the movie always felt very cartoonish to me, and especially now. Whereas, okay, it's that idea of serial killers have like really high IQs, and Hannibal listens to classical music and he eats the finest foods that aren't human, and he has like
uses ambergris hand lotion.
Yeah, he has like a photographic memory, and he draws pictures of like, when I was in college in Italy, and this is my view of the whatever.
Yeah.
And
we get it. You hate rich people.
Yeah, I do. Eat the rich, you know what I mean? Irony. Mads Mikkelsen wasn't any different in Hannibal, but they had more time to establish him, I feel like. Hannibal, it doesn't even really show up in the show in a big capacity until like maybe episode 4 or 5, where you finally start like getting to know him. But I like the groundwork of they don't even really explicitly tell you he's eating people at first. You never really see him like hunt his prey.
Right.
But I like the idea of a villain that one, he's just toying with the police the entire time. I mean, he works for the police, and especially his relationship with Will Graham. And he's a scary villain to me because you see Will Graham the entire time as almost the opposite of Hannibal. He's very like disheveled and a weirdo, and Hannibal is very charismatic and people like him. And he's just very easy to talk to.
Yeah.
And it's a villain that's able to convince everyone that the hero is the bad guy.
Yeah.
And I like that as well because Hannibal's able to orchestrate everything so he looks like he's the sensible one or he's the right one.
Yeah.
And that's a really scary bad guy to me too. A bad guy that can convince the vast majority of people that they're doing the right thing or they are the good person. Like, and I think it's like Dr. Doom's kind of the same way, where he's, I know he's, the dictator of a country, but they've done comics where people go into Latveria and they're like, no, we hate the Avengers. Like, Dr. Doom takes care of us. You know what I mean?
Or everybody's like, there's no poverty in Latveria. There's like, everything is good.
It's very hard for the people that like Dr. Doom decides to, like murder and blood rituals, but for everyone else, it's great.
Yeah. He didn't take Ra's al Ghul's notebook. No blood ritual.
Yeah.
I think
he didn't get the memo.
Yeah. Some iterations of like Lex Luthor are like that too. Like he was president for a while, where like people are actually like, this is my like runner-up best villain. I like a lot of iterations of Lex Luthor too, where they explore where he isn't the like I want to take over the world just because I want to be powerful, but like I think the really interesting thing about like villains like that is that they're right. Like Lex Luthor is completely right that like we shouldn't trust Superman and like he shouldn't just be allowed to do whatever he wants and we shouldn't rely on him to save all of us. And the only reason he's a villain is like because Superman is a good guy, like if
because our reference is framed through Superman,
right? Exactly. Yeah. Like if it were anyone else, or like if you think of like I think of Google as Superman right now, like the company Google. It's like it has all this power and it's collecting all this information on us and like shit like that. And they're like, laying Google Fiber, and we're like,
hey, let us scan your faces for a fun art thing.
Yeah, like shut up. You're the good guy. You're like bringing us high speed internet, and you're like just doing all this to help us and make our lives really easy. And it's like, no, that's terrifying. We should be terrified of them. But like, the like Superman friendly side of that is like, oh no, Google's great. They're just trying to help us. Like, and they're good guys. And the bad side of that is like the Lex Luthor side, like, no, we shouldn't give them this power. Like, we need to have checks and balances.
Lex Luthor.
No, Bing is.
Yeah. Bing is Lex Luthor. Ask.com is like a Bizarro. Like, me, Google.
What's the fucking weird, like, dark web Google? Like, it's called, like, DuckDuckGoose or something like that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Hold on, wait. Who's, I think Yahoo Answers is Mr. Mixpetal or whatever. I can't ever say that.
Spitlick?
Sure. Yeah, speaking of, like, names I can't pronounce.
I would say Mr. Mixapitilic.
Yeah.
But who gives a shit?
Yeah.
My biggest problem with Lex Luthor is he's always different.
Are we talking about Lex Luthor now, by the way, guys?
No,
we are.
Have we glossed over Hannibal? Okay, cool.
I'm sorry, I just hijacked it. I'm sorry, I'll reconnect it. So I think Hannibal has some similar threads there, where it's like you can to a lesser degree, but it's like you can almost buy what he's selling. He's charismatic, and he's just like, well, that person was rude, and he wins people over in a sense that you're almost like, yeah, it is okay to eat people. Wait, what did I just say?
How did he start eating people? Did they ever touch on that?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, okay, never mind.
No, it's his origin is that it was him and his sister, and I forget which war it was. It might have been World War II. I'm not sure. They are peasants in this cabin, and I think maybe Russian soldiers like break into their cabin during winter, and they like kill the family, and they end up like killing his like family and his sister and eating them to like survive the winter, and like that's how he kind of like gets the idea to like eat people. I don't know. It's really that book's horrible.
Dumb. Yeah,
it's another thing. Okay,
I thought he like lived with like a rich like governess in a mansion.
His Asian aunt.
Yeah. Like gets like taken in by some. Yeah.
That's the thing too. What really depresses me is if they had done season 4 of Hannibal, Brian Fuller said that the plan was to like kind of explore his origin a bit and fix it. And had David Bowie not died, David Bowie would have played Hannibal's uncle. That infuriates me that it didn't happen
that
because
is
that's fucking
incredibly disappointing
perfect
that didn't
casting. I always found out that David Bowie would have done something.
Yeah.
It's like he was supposed to be in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 as well.
Do you think he
Frustrating.
like knew he was dying and like agreed to take on all these projects and was just like
Just one last epic joke.
yeah, it's like yeah, I'll
Middle
take it.
finger
He's
on the
like,
way out.
this is David Bowie. Goodbye. It's like,
I think that's exactly what he said. Yes.
yeah. But
Aren't they doing some new Hannibal thing? Weren't they talking about like doing another season or doing like a web series or
they
some
keep
weird?
trying to come back for season 4 because
Yeah.
Brian Fuller is like, he was on Star Trek and then he left Star Trek and then he was on American Gods and he left American Gods. Brian Fuller can't find a project he likes and he keeps teasing the return of Hannibal. And another problem they were running into with Hannibal was that the next season would have been Silence of the Lambs.
Oh yeah.
And the company that was putting Hannibal out, NBC, does not own the rights to those characters. So they couldn't use Clarice Starling, they couldn't use Buffalo Bill. But I think all of those rights just revert it back.
Oh yeah.
So now they can. And I feel like they'll just never fucking make it because I feel like Mads Mikkelsen's kind of picked up in popularity now.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, he's in,
And he's done a Marvel movie.
a ton of shit.
He's
I-
like
Hannibal was always
he's fucking
really-
best friends with Hideo Kojima now, which I love.
Yeah, that is
Fucking
great.
Crazy.
Hannibal was always weird even when it was on the air too, and that it was like so critically acclaimed, but just like never rated well.
Yeah, no one watched
And,
it.
Yeah, like
It was in
no
a
one
Friday
watched it.
death slot, I think.
Yeah, and
But
it's just one of those shows that like it was like critics and fans loved, but like
It was so good. Like the writing was great, and every episode is fucking beautiful looking. Like every episode looked like an amazing movie, and all the characters were so engaging, and like the music was great. Everything about it was so good, and just no one gave a shit. And I really do think part of it was fatigue from Anthony Hopkins' portrayal.
yeah.
Because a lot of people I spoke to, I would always recommend the show, and they're like, "Oh, that's just kind of silly." Like, yeah, but you're thinking about Anthony Hopkins. He was very cartoonish. So,
I watched that. I've told you, Kyle, this before, but I was watching Hannibal like as the first season was coming out, and I ran into the problem that at the time, and even now to some degree, I like only really watch TV when I'm eating a meal, and that is not a show I could watch while eating a meal.
It wouldn't seem like it.
Like I was in college, and so it was like, you know, I never watched live TV. I still don't really watch live TV, but you know, I'd be like, oh, what's on Hulu, and like put it on like as I'm eating dinner or something, and then I'd put that on and it'd be like, oh, here's some people who had the skin flayed off their backs, and I'd be like, well,
All right, I'm done with dinner.
yeah, I don't want any more spaghetti, thank you.
episode.
Yeah. So I was like, I like this show, but I like had to be like, okay, I'll watch it some other time, and then I just never had the other time.
It's like one of those shows that you have to like allot time for.
Yeah, and like last year, I think I went and just like marathoned through it all, and it was great.
That's my main point. I know I wrote down some other villains really quick if you guys want to like hit some bullet points before we wrap up here.
Sure.
Like, who else did anyone have? Do you guys have like other people
I
written
went
down
on
in
my
your mind?
tangent about Lex Luthor. That is
Yeah.
sort of like who I had in mind as well.
Mike.
My other backup was Megatron.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
He
I
turns
just-
into a gun. Yeah, that's just.
Well, the original. Well, again, it's
Yeah,
the
but, like-
classic. Well, depending on which Transformer story you go
fires.
with, he's
If Soundscream isn't around.
anybody. Anyway,
What do you call him?
it's just
Soundscream?
sound
Is it
Star-
Starscream and
Starscream.
Sound. There's Starscream
I
and
said that,
Soundwave.
and I
Wave.
immediately
You combine the
I
two
immediately
into
went
one.
is it Starscream, and I didn't want to say anything in case you guys didn't notice.
Soundstar and
like-
Screamwave.
as
My two
if
favorite
this-
GoBots.
As if this isn't being recorded. Like,
No, depending on what iteration you're watching or reading, Megatron is just in a way again another one of those characters that he doesn't think he's wrong. Like he and Optimus Prime were both good guys at one point, and then their planet started dying, and they just saw different ways of fixing the problem, and Optimus Prime was viewed as the good guy, and Megatron was viewed as the bad guy.
I know I just had a whole big thing where I said how much I love complex villains that don't think they're the bad guy, but I love 80s cartoon bad guys like Megatron, Cobra Commander, Mumra, where it's like, have a good day. I don't want to have a good day. Like they're like, all right. Like they're just like pure id. They're just pure bad guys, and they do have the dumbest fucking plots to do everything. But
I want to double back because I never like really watched the Transformers cartoon, as you might have guessed from my earlier guess. And the movies were garbage and shouldn't be relied on for source material. So
the first one was okay.
the first one was okay. We've talked
Everything
enough about.
else,
We need to stop bringing up
garbage.
Transformers movies and shows. But was Megatron's whole thing like just that their planet died, and so he wanted to like populate the Earth with Transformers?
In the movies, yes.
Oh, okay.
It-
I don't even remember that from the movies.
Like I said, there are so many different iterations of Transformers and so many different stories that there's not really... The only constant is that Cybertron is fucked.
Okay.
That's really the
So,
only
like-
constant in the Transformers universe.
Is Megatron like a cross between like Superman and Avatar? Like James Cameron Avatar? Is it just like we're going to go to this planet and fucked
Kinda.
over the native people so that we can
Kinda.
have our own planet with unobtainium and
We're gonna go
hookers?
to Earth and fuck them with our ponytails. Wait, what?
So
Yeah.
in the movie universe, they come to Earth because there's like 6 different MacGuffins on Earth for some reason, and they never activate at the same time.
Yeah.
In the first one, it was the Allspark. In the second one, there was something built into
Devastator's
the
balls, yeah.
There was something, yeah. There was something built into the pyramids. In the third one, there was something on the moon. In the fourth one, there were dinosaurs. And
I remember-
And then in the fifth one, there was like something in the bottom of the ocean.
I watched up to the
like-
third one, Dark Side of the Moon, and I remember being like, why haven't they addressed this in the first 2 movies? Like, it wasn't like,
That's
it
the
just
thing.
landed on the dark side of the moon. It's like, no, it was always there. Then why didn't you
Yeah.
investigate that when you like first came?
Yeah, in the movies, they keep saying like that there's these big like key objects on that somehow landed on Earth. And
Yeah, like eons ago.
Yeah.
And we're just going to address it now.
yeah, they're just gonna address them all at different times.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense.
Pretty much.
I'm gonna wrap up with my second favorite movie villain of all time,
Go for it.
and it's another one, and I like him because he's just pure like deception. Is Hans Gruber from Die Hard?
Sure.
Because one, it's the
good one.
late great Alan Rickman, who is so perfect and so good in so many villainous roles as well.
Yeah.
He has like that perfect bad guy voice I really enjoy. But I like Hans Gruber because he's presented as such a threat, and he's really just so basic. And just so like almost
He is
like
a basic bitch.
he is. He's just so non-threatening in the end.
Yeah.
Where you find it is like, oh, he's just a bank robber. That's all he is. He's
Yeah.
very like charming. And,
Yeah, he's a thief.
he's a
Yeah.
thief. That's all he is.
So-
One of those British German fake
Does
terrorist
he-
robbers.
He's one of
Yeah,
those
dime a dozen.
Western Eastern Euro German French guys. Yeah.
Does he kill anybody? He kills 2 people in that movie. He kills
He kills the
boss?
smarmy dude.
and then the boss, right? The Asian
Yeah.
guy. Does he even kill, or does one of the henchmen kill the Asian guy in the beginning?
I think
Mr.
it's a henchman.
Yakatomi.
I think it's a henchman.
So then
I
he
think
really only just kills one person.
He kills the guy that talks like this the entire time.
Yeah, the guy that
yeah.
the guy that was doing coke and trying to convince him that he was best friends with John McClane.
Yeah. I fucking hate that dude.
Yeah.
Hans Gruber's almost a good guy for killing that guy.
Yeah.
But
So really,
Everything else was justified. For
I
him.
also really like
he deserved those bearer bonds.
I really
right?
like Hans Gruber's American accent as well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
God,
God.
please don't kill me.
I really like it. Almost reminds me of Bill and Kill Bill, where he's talking about Superman's actual like
Yeah.
like Clark Kent, where he's like, oh, like Clark Kent's his costume, and it's how he views humans as like clumsy and weak and like humbling.
How
And
Alan Rickman
that's
views
how
Americans.
Yeah, not even Hans Gruber, it's Alan Rickman. That's how he views Americans. Like, Al, just go for it.
Yeah. Just
Oh,
like do
God.
what. Yeah, do what you think an American is.
I peed myself. Like, Al, you ran it back, but I don't have free health care. All right, guys.
Topical.
Yeah. Topical for the next 3 years? Maybe. All right, guys.
Forever.
Thank you for joining the Sleep Nerds podcast.
Yay.
Hey, we're back.
We never went anywhere, Kyle.
Well,
Lift the veil. Lift the veil. Peek behind the curtain.
what curtain? Bye.
On the next episode, we learn Kyle is the Wizard of Oz.
Bye, sheeple. Hey everyone, if you enjoy listening to the Sleepy Nerds podcast and want to hear more from us, you can follow us on Facebook at Sleepy Nerds Podcast, on Instagram and Twitter at Sleepy Nerds Pod, and you can also subscribe to us on YouTube, Podbean, and iTunes.